Eloise broke my heart. I know I should have been sharper and more sophisticated about the whole thing. However, I am still essentially a farm boy, even after all these years. I'm Walter Stillman, a future tax attorney by trade. I know, boring, right? But I wasn't like that at all. Fresh out of law school and with a master's degree in taxation, the only job I could get was in the bankruptcy department of a mid-sized Manhattan law firm. My position was in the firm's smallest practice area, and it must be said, the least desirable. My living arrangements were as modest as my job. Rents in New York City are notoriously high. In those days, apartments in Manhattan were out of reach for junior associates. In those neighborhoods called the outer boroughs, prices were almost as high. After much searching, I found a room in an apartment with two other impoverished souls at the end of a subway line in Brooklyn. The neighborhood was in general decline, and the drive to my office took forever. All in all, I had a modest job and a roof over my head. More could not be said for the beginning of my career in the great city to the east. However, my luck seemed to change almost from the day I started work. The bankruptcy partner of the firm was Eric Erickson. He was a silver-haired fox in his 60s. He was one of the de facto deans of the New York bankruptcy bar, the man you went to with a complex or unusual matter. He had no patience for the ignorant and inept, but he was a good and willing teacher. Years later, I am still grateful to Mr. Erickson. He, as the townspeople say, did me good. He was my mentor and friend and taught me skills that were to serve me well in the days to come. I didn't know it then, but I had found my place in life, and then by pure chance I found happiness. But first I had to have my heart broken. In the bankruptcy department, it was mostly just Mr. Erickson and me. In those prosperous times, bankruptcy was the least popular practice at the prestigious firm of Portman and Rosencrantz. If we needed help, two part-time associates, albeit reluctantly, assisted us. I majored in a field of law that could be said to have been written by Lewis Carroll. A jurisdiction where left is right and right is always wrong. All laws belong to Alice on the other side of the looking glass. Chuck Thompson was the only member of my graduating class at Northwestern University School of Law who made it as far east as I did. We were not great friends in law school. Nevertheless, our familiarity with the Midwest brought us closer together in the cold eastern metropolis. Chuck worked, or rather, had worked, in the Manhattan District Attorney's office. He was newly married to Carol, a girl from New York. I guess it was only natural to be invited to dinner at their Manhattan apartment. Upon arrival, I was stunned by the presence of a tall, extremely attractive woman. Eloise Schaffer was New York elegant. That's the most appropriate way to describe her. She was a sophisticated New Yorker with casual manners that suggested that her stunning appearance was quite expected. One could almost believe that the perfection of her form was a fact of nature and not the result of long hours of work and gimmicks. Why she was my dinner partner at my friend's house, I had no idea. This raven-haired, green-eyed beauty was not my equal. In fact, no one could have expected her to be interested in a farm boy of average looks working as a junior assistant. But apparently Carol Thompson, in her matchmaking wisdom, thought otherwise. An evening of delightful socializing awaited me. Eloise Schaffer was not only beautiful, she had what is called a personality. Extroverted and not at all shy, she was a lively dinner companion. She asked me to walk her home to her Brooklyn apartment. I expected to take a cab, but she insisted we take the subway. She stayed by my side during the ride from Chelsea in Manhattan to Boerum Hill in Brooklyn. It was a trip that took a long overnight and included a short walk. She used this time to get to know me better. She inundated me with questions, the answers to which she listened intently. It was a heady, self-esteem boosting experience. At the door to her apartment, she insisted on rewarding me with a kiss for my efforts to walk her home. Can I see you again?" I asked. With some effort, we found a mutually agreeable time for our official first date, and then, after kissing me a second time, she said goodnight. I flew off to my dingy abode at the far end of Flatbush Avenue, not believing I could be so lucky. 5 weeks later and 4 dates into the relationship, I was in a deep valley of despair. The night before, Eloise had informed me that she would not be able to see me over the weekend. The reason was her prior commitment to another man. With great difficulty, I extracted from Eloisa the name of Rodrigo Ruiz. He was easy to find. He was the state labor commissioner, a very tall, handsome older man. He was the kind of man you'd expect from a woman like Eloisa. Apparently, I wasn't hiding my despair very well, because Mr. Erickson called me into his office. "So, Walt, what took that silly Midwestern smile off your face and left despondency in its place?" questioned Eric. "Sorry, that's a personal thing. Didn't want to bother anyone with my problems." Hiding anything from Eric was useless. Soon he had the whole story. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands in prayer, and rested his chin on his fingertips. "When I was a boy," he began, "this town was still run by Irishmen and Jews. They were interesting to watch. Third and even fourth generation Americans who spoke with detachment or inserted Yiddish phrases into their speech. They were men and women who had graduated from Fordham and Columbia University, but had mastered the art of being professionally ethnic. Now they're gone. Sometimes I miss the fun they used to bring to the art of politics. Now politicians are professionally black or Hispanic. They lack the same pathos, or so it seems to me, and I think they take themselves too seriously." "I'm sorry, Mr. Erickson. I don't understand." "My fondest wish is that you never lose your Midwestern innocence," he said, sighing. "Walter, your girlfriend's man was born Rodney Kaufman. His father was the heir to the Kaufman's department store fortune, and his mother was a Puerto Rican Jewish woman named Luisa Ruiz. Rodney married Sophie Sloan, a member of the wealthiest Sloan family. For political reasons, he took his mother's last name and the Spanish version of his surname. Roddy is a professional Hispanic and a full-time politician. Your lady appears to prefer him to you for 3 good reasons. First, he's 47 years old. Your lady is much younger. Second, he is married to a nice Jewish woman with whom he has 3 children. This lady is not very jealous, lets her husband play, but would strongly object to being replaced. So will her rich and powerful family. And thirdly, there is Roddy himself and his family. These are progressive times, but I doubt he would want to offend his wealthy and politically supportive family by getting involved with a Christian girl." "But if she's dating him," remarked I. Eric frowned impatiently, as usual for stupid questions. "How old is this lady?" he asked. 29. A lady with a neglected biological clock, and you're a fit 26-year-old attorney. I don't think you've properly assessed your value in this case." The inclusion of the Roddy boy into the equation was only to induce in you the proper motivation to move forward. 4 dates at that age with a 29-year-old single woman means things are serious. So it's either serious or get the hell out of here, concluded Eric Erickson. After talking to my boss, I felt better and moreover, emboldened. On the next date, I pushed on and was rewarded with a heated response. "If we're moving forward, I need to know you're serious," she said. I could ask the same thing. "Are you speaking generally?" "Yes, and about Roddy." "I've been seeing him for a few years now," she declared. "But he's not serious, and I am," I replied, once again thinking about how smart Erickson was. She led me to her bed. I wasn't a virgin, though I didn't have much experience. She had much more experience, and she used every bit of it. I barely survived the night. A week later, I moved into her apartment. It was a large apartment by New York standards with one of those corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly. The proposal was inevitable. She started hinting as soon as I settled into the apartment. When we met, Eloise was 29 years old, working as a junior executive at Sanderson Financial Management. She was already on the ladder of senior management, and shortly after we got engaged, she became a vice president. I had already figured out that she was smart and a bit meticulous, but her organizational skills almost stunned me. The wedding preparations took barely 6 weeks. She was the eldest of 3 children in the family and the only daughter. Her father was also a lawyer, but he was a real estate developer in Westchester and Putnam counties, north of New York City. As far as I could make out, he was heavily into politics. So the wedding turned out to be really big, and they planned it so well and quickly. Death had reduced my family to one sister. Nancy was now living on the West Coast in Portland with a friend of hers. She stopped talking to me the day she informed me she was a lesbian. Maybe I didn't show the proper enthusiasm, but some kind of chasm had opened up that could no longer be closed. I invited her to the wedding, but she declined. There was a comfortable period in my career. I was now doing less complicated things without Eric's help. He made no secret of the fact that he was grooming me for the job. The bankruptcy was in a slow cycle, and Eric made no secret that I had better be ready when things picked up because he was preparing for retirement. You have everything you need, a fair amount of intelligence and a pleasant personality, but you need to learn how to work, he said. I'm studying the laws and cases diligently. Yeah, but you need techniques they don't write down. I learned a new technique the Friday before the wedding. Eloise and her mother had chosen Labor Day for the wedding. There was something I didn't understand about the early date, but it also meant we had a weekend to prepare and could fly out on the honeymoon to the Caribbean that her parents were arranging for us the Tuesday after the wedding. The bags were packed and leaned against the wall in the long hallway of our apartment. 3 for Eloise and 1 for me. I was a little nervous about the wedding, but I didn't have time to think about it that morning. The week before, my bride-to-be had flown out to the family home in Westchester so we could be apart before the wedding. It would make the honeymoon even better and keep my wedding worries from knocking my hubby out, she said with a laugh. At 10 o'clock on Friday, the last business day of August, 3 days before the wedding, I had a hearing in bankruptcy court for a first-day order. Such an order is issued in the early stages of reorganization to set the rules for the debtor's continued operation under the protection of the court. If the case is small, as mine is, the hearing is not very formal, usually with only a few attorneys present with the judge. Mostly the bank's lawyer and the debtor's lawyer, such as myself. Judge Marks usually stuck to the rules. That Friday, I walked into my office ready to grab my folder and head to court, but the clerk informed me that the judge's secretary had called and scheduled the hearing over the phone as soon as I walked in. I immediately became nervous. The judge's clerk connected all the parties, and Judge Marks said, "So, Amanda, tell me what your problem is with this ruling." Amanda Moskowitz was the bank's attorney. She was smart, and she knew the law. Her arguments were precise and hit the weakest points of my request very accurately. She was an excellent attorney, but not overly personable. She was nicknamed Sugar, which made no sense. She was short, less than 5 feet, and chubby, especially in her lower half, but I always thought she had a cute face. When Amanda finished, I tried to speak, but the judge interrupted me. "The order has been accepted. My secretary will fax it to the parties," he said as the phone went silent. Amanda only laughed when I asked her, "What just happened?" "Judge Marks got tickets from my firm yesterday for the last few days of racing at Saratoga. He needs to be north of Albany by 1 o'clock this afternoon. He can't talk to us on the phone. He ruled against me today for appearances in a case that doesn't really matter, but wait until next time and I'll stab you," she said, still laughing. "Not that I like to win," I complained. "Take what you can get," she replied, and paused. "You know, my aunts would say you're a very nice young man for a goy." Still laughing, she ended the conversation. About this time, Eric came in and told me to take the day off and rest before the wedding. As I was leaving, I couldn't resist asking, "What's a goy?" He smiled. "You and I are Gentiles. Why?" "Someone said I was a nice young man for a goy." "Oh, a compliment. Someone likes you." I headed for the apartment. I figured I could make an early trip to Westchester. I wasn't due to arrive until the next day. The wedding rehearsal was Saturday night. But heck, why kill time in the city? I expected to be busy with my business. It was going to take most of the afternoon, and maybe even the evening. We would write and rewrite every word of the order to please everyone involved, but that didn't happen. So why not get a head start? I tried calling first, but Eloise's phone switched to voicemail, so I made a fateful choice. I called her parents' house in Westchester, hoping to talk to someone or at least leave a message. And I guess it was one of those random circumstances that change everything. None of the Schaffer family was home. The usual maid, Rosita, had taken the day off to fit the dress she would wear to the wedding. She was replaced by a cousin. The cousin turned out to be a woman with limited English, with whom I had never spoken. She didn't recognize my name. "I want to leave a message for Miss Eloise. This is Walter," I said for the third time. "She's not here. She's in town." "I know she lives in town, but she came home for the wedding. This is Walter, and I'm coming over later today." "She's in town. Stay at the hotel. We'll be here tomorrow for the wedding," said Rosita's cousin. It took a second, but my curiosity was piqued. "What hotel?" "The Plaza," came the reply. I'm not a suspicious person, but who wouldn't wonder after a conversation like that? It was almost noon when I broke down and called the Plaza Hotel. Our reception was in Westchester County, not the famous Plaza Hotel in New York City. Something was going on that I wasn't told about. There had been a bachelorette party the previous week, but perhaps the ladies had decided to have another pre-wedding celebration. I called the hotel and asked them to look up Eloise Schaffer. No one registered under that name. Then, perhaps out of insecurity, I asked, "What about Rodrigo Ruiz?" "No, sorry," the young woman said. "Try Rodney Kaufman." There was a pause, and she replied, "Yes, we have Mr. and Mrs. Rodney Kaufman in the bridal suite. Please put me through." It could still have been someone else. The name isn't that rare, I told myself as the phone rang. When a man answered, I almost hung up, but I had to ask. "Eloise Schaffer, please," I said. "Elle, it's for you," I heard his voice. "Hello?" she said. I recognized her voice, but I couldn't speak. "Hello? Is someone there?" "There's no one there," she answered him. "There was. He was asking about you." "Hello?" "This is Walter. You shouldn't go to the wedding. I won't be there," I said, finally finding my voice. As I hung up, I heard her shout my name before the phone disconnected. I don't remember the time that followed very well. I was in shock. I sat in the apartment as if paralyzed. In a way, I was paralyzed. It seemed as if the strength had left my body. All the good things in my life seemed to have disappeared. It was all a lie. The romance, the life together, and the fancy apartment. It was our apartment, but it actually belonged to her on a lease. My mind worked in a kind of lockdown mode. I knew I needed to get up, grab my bag in the hallway, and leave. I had nowhere to go, but needed to get out of where I was. Someone opened the apartment door. It was her. I vaguely wondered how she got here so fast. I glanced at the clock and saw that it was 2 o'clock. It occurred to me that the judge must be at the races. That fact changed my life. "Walter, we need to talk," she said. "Have you been there all week?" I asked. She stood in the middle of the living room. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "We just said goodbye," she said. "So it never really ended," I accused. "Walter, stop it. You know I love you." "How would I know that?" "I'll never see him again. We're over it," she said. "Why?" "I was with him for 7 years, almost from the day I moved to the city." "No. Why did it end?" "Because I'm marrying you on Monday," she said. "No, you're not." "Walter, please be reasonable. It's already been decided. 300 plus guests are coming." I didn't answer anything. There was no point. I stood up and walked past her. "Where are you going? We have to settle this!" she shouted. I picked up my bag and walked out. She followed, yelling for me to stop. Eventually, she gave up. I wandered aimlessly for quite some time. I vaguely felt like I was heading towards the bridge. It was getting dark and I was tired of walking. I crossed Court Street, not far from the municipal building. I found a small bar. It was crowded on a Friday night, but I found a dark corner and crawled in. "Hi," she said. I looked up and saw Sugar Moskowitz. She had a glass in each hand. She placed one in front of me. "I thought you looked like you could use one," she said. "Thanks," I mumbled, taking a sip of the very strong drink. "It's called a stinger, and as you can see, I'm not a religious girl," she said. "Religious?" She smiled. It was a beautiful smile, and she explained, "Drinking in a singles bar with Goyim on a Friday night. And what can I tell my mom about that suitcase?" When she said that, I lowered my eyes, suddenly remembering my suitcase. "Oh, well, I had to leave. After all, it's her apartment," I said, taking a sip of the drink that was chugging all the way down. Sugar Amanda didn't ask me any questions. She told me funny stories about herself and people we mutually knew from bankruptcy court. It's a small specialty and everyone knows each other. She kept my glass full and tried to make me laugh. I think she already knew I was engaged and getting married soon, but she didn't seem surprised that I was in a Brooklyn bar with a suitcase on the Friday before the wedding. Perhaps she had had a few drinks before I arrived and didn't realize the significance of the suitcase and where I was now. And practically the only thing I remember about that night is Amanda helping me into the car and saying, "It's a short drive." Later, I had a dream about Eloise. She had me pinned to the bed and was riding me cowboy style. It's not her favorite position, but she seemed to be enjoying it a lot more than usual. Next chapter. I needed to go to the bathroom. It was an absolute necessity, but as I got out of bed, I realized I had no idea where I was. The apartment had changed. For a moment, I was completely disoriented, and then it all came back to me in the form of one sharp and painful memory. I had walked away from Eloise in her apartment. And where was I now? My head hurt like someone had stuffed it with absorbent cotton. I couldn't remember much about the night before. I remember going into a little bar on Court Street. Someone I knew appeared there. For a moment, I couldn't remember who it was. And then I remembered. Amanda Sugar Moskowitz. What was she doing there? And what was I doing here in an unfamiliar bed? I was in a small room. It barely fit a double bed. There was no other furniture in the room. The bed was directly adjacent to a window that stretched from the middle of the wall to the ceiling. I was alone on this bed, which apparently had another person sleeping on it. There was no closet in the room, and my clothes were nowhere to be seen. In fact, the room might have been an overly large closet with a bed in it. There was a door. It didn't open all the way as it was blocked by the bed. I looked out. The room was larger. There was a window in the wall on one side. Behind it, I could see the sidewalk. I was in what in this part of the world is called an English basement. It is the floor below the main building. It is half above ground and half below ground. The windows began just below the level of the sidewalk. This room was used to make a small apartment, or as I found out later, two apartments. The one I was in and an even smaller back room. The main room was divided by a counter into a dining room and a kitchen. The bay window was a sort of living room with two small chairs and a chair by the window. Seeing no one, I crept outside in search of the bathroom and my clothes. There was a door at the far end of the room. As I walked in, it opened. Amanda Moskowitz came out in a robe, toweling her wet hair. "Oh, you're awake," she said, noticing me. "About time you did. It must be almost noon." My hands flew to cover my genitals, which only elicited a giggle. "A little late for modesty," she said. "I saw everything last night." All I could do was run past her, assuming that the room she came out of with wet hair was the bathroom. I turned out to be right, and after closing the door, I lifted the toilet seat and released the contents of my bladder into the toilet bowl. It was a small bathroom with only a shower stall, no bathtub. I decided to take advantage of this and wash myself before discussing with the owner what had happened to my clothes and suitcase. The shower may be small, but the water was hot and soothed my very hungover body. After regaining my strength, I searched in vain for a towel. There was nothing left for me to do but step out to meet Amanda. I opened the bathroom door and stepped out, but realized we were no longer alone. A young, dark-haired woman was sitting at the table looking directly at me with a wide grin on her face. Amanda was in the small, open-plan kitchen, fussing with cups and a coffee pot. "How do you like your coffee?" asked Amanda. I called out, "Can I please have a towel?" Both women laughed, but Amanda paused to say, "It's all in the closet, just like your bag and the clothes you threw off last night." Poking my head out from behind the door, I asked, "Where could the closet be?" Still giggling, Amanda pointed with the coffee pot to the lattice doors at the far end of the room behind the desk and directly in front of the front door to the apartment. "I'd bring them to you, but as you can see, I'm busy," Amanda said. The other woman made no attempt to get up and had no choice but to run to the closet. So I rushed after her. Once I reached the closet, I swung the doors open. My clothes were right inside. The suit and shirt were hung neatly. I grabbed the ladder, pulling on the shorts and shirt as fast as I could. But all the while I could hear the women giggling behind my back. "Walter, this is my sister, Sonia Rabinowitz, by the way," Amanda said. "Hello, Mr. Stillman," Sonia said. "Hello," I replied, opening the briefcase to pull out a pair of jeans. "Don't feel you need to dress up for me," Sonia said. "I'm the younger sister, but I'm already married and have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl." They both laughed as I pulled on my jeans. "Let's go get some coffee," Amanda invited. And Sonia brought a Bialy. "I'll just be a minute," I replied. "You didn't tell me he was so shy," Sonia whispered to her sister. "I didn't know," Amanda replied, also whispering loudly. "We're kind of new at this." "You're a loose woman, Amanda Moskowitz," Sonia giggled. After putting on my pants and shirt, I turned to take a seat at the small table. I needed coffee. "I like my coffee black, no sugar," I said. Sonia giggled and whispered to her sister, "He must have gotten his sugar last night." They burst into laughter. I had a headache. Amanda handed me a cup of very strong coffee. As I placed the cup in front of me, my cell phone rang. It was Sonia's phone, and she pulled it out of a large leather purse that lay at her feet on the floor. "Oh, hi," Sonia said, answering the call. She closed the receiver and whispered, "Aunt Hester." "Of course I remembered," Sonia continued. "I'm at Amanda's right now to remind her, but she has company and I didn't have time to mention it." There was a pause, then Sonia said with a smirk, "No, her company is men." Amanda ran her hand across her throat in reproach, but Sonia nonchalantly continued, "Yes, he's handsome, but a little shy. No, definitely not Jewish. Yes, I'm absolutely sure." Sonia whispered into the tube, "I caught a glimpse of him when he was getting out of the shower." Sonia was laughing uncontrollably now. "She wants to talk to you," Sonia said, handing Amanda the phone. "Hi, Auntie," Amanda said into Sonia's handset. "No, I'll never forget Daddy's birthday. Tomorrow at 6 and we're having dinner at 7. Got it. Oh, he's just a friend. Really?" There was a pause while Hester spoke. "That won't do. He's a work friend. I'm sure he'll feel awkward at a family party." Amanda handed the phone back to her sister. Sonia listened while her aunt spoke. "I don't know," Sonia said, and then turning to me, "She wants to know your name. What should I tell her?" "Walter," I answered. "Walter Stillman. It's Walter, and I'm pretty sure they slept together last night." "Sonia," exclaimed Amanda. "Now Aunt Sophie is calling and saying she wants to meet him." "No. Oh, sugar? No," shouted Amanda. Then Sonia handed the phone to me. "My Aunt Sophie wants to talk to you." I picked up the phone and put it to my ear. "Hello, Walter. I'm Amanda's Aunt Sophie and my sister Hester, and I are throwing a birthday party for our brother Leonard, Amanda, and Sonia's father. We'd like you to come with our Mandy. Would you mind? It would mean a lot to our family." "I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to get involved. Mr. Moskowitz might not want me at his party," I said, thinking of a polite way to decline. "I'll leave that up to Amanda." I then handed the phone back to Amanda. She argued with the aunts for a good 10 minutes while a mischievous Sonia smirked. The aunts on the phone disconnected, each taking turns arguing with her niece. Finally, Amanda gave up. Okay, I'll get him, she said, and then hanging up the phone added, Sugar, sugar, sugar. That's what she does, said Sonia. What? I asked. Substitutes the word sugar, like we don't know what she's really saying. With one last grin, Sonia stood up and said, Well, it looks like my work here is done. Time to let my husband go before my children drive him crazy. Left alone, Amanda turned to me and said, Look, you don't have to come. My family can be overbearing sometimes. I just don't understand why your aunts want an outsider at a family celebration. Amanda gave a short, almost sad laugh and said, Sonia is my younger sister by almost 4 years. I turned 30 on my last birthday. She already has 3 children. My aunts and the rest of the family think I should be married and pregnant by now. I guess your biological clock is ticking on their shelf, but they still don't know me, and apparently I'm of the wrong religion. But you're the right gender, she said, and paused before continuing. You see, I used to have a roommate here. It helped pay the $3,500 a month rent. As you must know, junior bankruptcy lawyers don't get paid that much. I nodded, knowing the limited salaries in our segment of the legal business. But then it hit me. There was only one bed here. Your roommate was a woman? Yes, but don't jump to conclusions, Sugar said. I'm not going to claim to be completely straight, but I'd have to be a little drunk to do it with a girl. For Jessie, my former roommate, drinking was a killer. She wanted a relationship that I couldn't give her. So here I am, almost a straight Jewish spinster. I pondered her words while chewing on a Bailey. It looks like a bagel, but it isn't. Finally, I asked the question that had been bugging me. Last night Amanda burst into loud laughter and replied, Yes, we were, although I didn't really like being called Eloise. Sorry, I said, feeling my face redden. Hey, no need to play the prude. We were both a little drunk, she said. Notice you were pretty drunk. I took a long drink of my coffee and tried to figure out how my life had taken such a strange turn. Yesterday morning, I'd been on the phone prosecuting a case against the woman who now sat across from me in a bathrobe, Amanda Moskowitz, whom I like to call Sugar. Yesterday morning, I was excited about my upcoming wedding to Eloise. A day later, I lost Eloise and discussed yesterday with the same Miss Moskowitz. This is too much, I said. What? This, I said. Eloise, and the fact that I'm here with you. She didn't laugh, but in retrospect, it wasn't easy. Look, you've had a rough time with Eloise and all. How about we relax here tonight? I thought for a moment. I don't think I can be alone right now. If you don't mind, I'll stay. She smiled and said, Good. We'll redeem my heterosexuality. So we did. We climbed back into bed. In the morning, my aunts called, reminding Amanda of the party coming up tonight and asking if she could come early to help with the arrangements. Mandy, don't forget to bring Walter with you. Sonia has told us all about him, and we are all very eager to meet him, Aunt Hester told Amanda. I don't know what Sonia told you, but he's not my boyfriend. Well, bring him over anyway. He knows he's invited. If he's coming, Amanda said, and hung up. I take it I'm expected, I said with a chuckle. You don't need to come, she told me. What else am I supposed to do? I didn't want to be alone, not now. Amanda had distracted me from the disaster in my personal life, and I had no desire to sit around and contemplate what Eloise had done. Okay, she said. But keep in mind that you'll be subjected to a lot of scrutiny and treated like a potential suitor. Well, in a way, I am a groom. But if you don't mind, let's keep my personal problem to myself, I said. Sounds good to me. That whore Eloise no longer exists, but just for today, because you're going to have to deal with her, and the sooner the better. I know, I said with a slight sigh. Amanda reached across the table to cover my hands with her own and said, Walter, you must either consummate the marriage or end it tomorrow. Either way, you're going to be in big trouble. I can't go through with it. Not now. Don't be so hasty. If you refuse now, it will have big consequences for your career and life. There will be a huge scandal. Why? I'm not going to divulge the reason, and I'm sure she won't. Oh, my poor innocent, she said, squeezing my hands tightly. Do you really think people didn't know about Commissioner Ruiz and Eloise Schaffer? They've been together for quite some time. I thought they'd broken up. Amanda didn't laugh, but her crooked smile said it all. I'd been played. Eloise had been dating Ruiz the entire time we'd been together. But why? I asked. If she wants to remain his mistress, there's no point in bringing me into it. He wants to run for governor next year, she said. Your marriage to Eloise seems to have ended the affair, and you were a good catch. The kind of young, decent, professional, heterosexual man every cis woman in New York is looking for. Cis woman? A person who identifies with their sex by birth. In this case, a woman, Eloise Schaffer. A young woman who needs a partner to shut down rumors of her affair with an older married politician. She played me, as you New Yorkers like to say. Oh, don't feel sorry for yourself. She was probably just saying goodbye, as she claimed. A week before our wedding? Would you rather she did it next week? I'd prefer she didn't do it at all. In fact, I insist on it. Well, you got your revenge on her with me. You can still go to Westchester and marry her. That's not going to happen. Hey, you need to get a grip before you do rash things. If you don't show up at church tomorrow, people are going to ask why. Let them. Okay, time out. No one needs a scandal. You, my friend, are a junior lawyer in the bankruptcy department. On the other hand, Commissioner Ruiz is a very big figure. If you make a wave, his boat may rock, but yours will go down. Do you mean that I shall lose my job? So what? I say you'll lose your career. No one will hire you. I had to pause, but not for long. Amanda, I said, I may be just an unsophisticated guy from Iowa, but when Eloise accepted my offer, she made a commitment to me. She didn't keep her commitment, and I won't be forced to keep mine. Amanda only shook her head. Finally, she said, Come on, you stubborn cornhusker. Get dressed. I'm taking you to meet my family. It's not every day they get to meet a real live Presbyterian. Actually, my family is Lutheran. There's a difference. She winked. Next chapter. At 5 p.m., we took a yellow cab and drove to the Moskowitz's house on Beverly Road. It was forbidden to use the car service. Uncle Morty had been a cab driver and had worked as one until he retired. Morty was now living on his welfare with his two sisters, Hester and Sophie, in the house the sisters had inherited from their parents. Morty was married, but his wife had eloped 30 years earlier with a shoe salesman, a fact apparently never discussed. Aunt Sophie's husband died in Vietnam. Hester never married. Only Amanda's father, Leonard, the youngest of the siblings, had children. Leonard and his wife Rebecca had 2 girls, Amanda and Sonia, and now have 3 grandchildren, thanks to Sonia and her husband Gerald, Jerry, Rabinowitz. The Moskowitz family home was in the Flatbush, Brooklyn neighborhood that realtors called Ditmas or Ditmas Park. As we pulled up to the huge 2-story house on a lot larger than the standard size for urban living, I didn't notice any park. Unlike Amanda's apartment, which was across the street from a small park in a quiet neighborhood, her aunts and uncles lived on a heavily trafficked avenue. The house was built in the Queen Anne style. Not big enough to be a mansion, but it was a larger single-family home than one would find in a city like New York. Aunt Hester, a short, stout woman with steel gray hair, met us at the door. First, she hugged Amanda and greeted her as Mandy. Then she turned to me, and after examining me from head to toe, said, Not bad at all. A fine-looking young man. Oh, I think he's quite handsome, said Aunt Sophie, who had appeared from the back of the house. Sophie was a tall, dark-haired woman. The 2 sisters seemed an incompatible pair. Sophie hugged Amanda, and both aunts led us into the kitchen where the evening meal was being prepared. There was a large cake on the kitchen counter. The kitchen smelled of roast meat that was cooking in the oven and the sweet aroma of vanilla. Mandy, can you peel our potatoes for us? Asked Sophie, holding out a peeler and colander filled with freshly washed potatoes. I'll get your man to help set the table, Hester said, taking my hand and leading me through the swinging door into the wood-paneled dining room. The room was a long, wide rectangle. A thick burgundy carpet covered the hardwood floor. Dark oak paneling rose from the floor to half a wall where artfully rose-embossed paper pulled the eye upward. The ceiling was an intricate lattice of mahogany and oak. A modest chandelier dangled down from a medallion decorated with ornate carved mahogany flowers. Hester led me over to the china cabinets along the near wall. The cabinets took up most of the wall along the short side of the room. The shelves of the cabinets were filled with numerous sets of china plates. She led us over to the far cabinet and said, "We're going to use these plates today." Having said that, she smiled at me and said, "It's not easy being a Jew. You need all these dishes." At the time, I had only a vague idea that one set was for meat and the other for milk. Hester handed me a stack of plates, and we began setting a massive table on clawed legs. It was covered with an immaculate white linen tablecloth. I couldn't resist surreptitiously examining the backs of the plates and the tags on the linen. The china had come from England, and the linen from Ireland. The real thing, I thought, just like the people are authentic. While Hester set the table and I carried out the dinnerware, she seemed to question me aimlessly. I supposed it was for the purpose of separating me from her niece. Soon she knew all my personal history, with the exception of my aborted marriage. As we placed the last silver fork on the last plate, she said so nonchalantly, "It doesn't hurt, you know. It's just a little bite. Most babies don't even cry." The meaning of what she said escaped me. Before I could ask for an explanation, however, there was a noise in the hallway. A commanding female voice announced, "I'm here, and I've brought the birthday boy." It was Rebecca Moskowitz, also known as Judge Levin of the U.S. District Court, who walked in. As it turned out, this was Amanda Moskowitz's mother. Her father was Leonard Moskowitz, an economics professor at New York University. I was invited specifically to Leonard's birthday celebration. Hester nudged me into the kitchen to greet her brother and sister-in-law. Amanda had already peeled the potatoes and put them on the stove when I entered the kitchen. She turned to me and said, "We have to wait here while my aunts break the news that you are here as their guest." "Am I going to be a problem for you?" I asked, suddenly feeling protective of her. "No, but maybe a little shocking. I've never brought a man home before. Mom can be a little critical, so be prepared." It was an awkward situation, and it only got worse when we were called into the living room to introduce me to her parents. The living room was a large, cozy room, furnished in the style of the first half of the 20th century. It was relaxing to be in, but I could feel the tension. On the way out, Amanda pulled a small box out of the light jacket she had hung in the hallway when we arrived that afternoon. The box was clearly wrapped as a birthday present. When we entered the living room, there was an awkward silence. Farter Sugar broke the silence with a smile and a joke. "Is this young man my birthday present, Mandy?" he asked. "No, Dad," Sugar replied quietly. "I brought you this." She walked over to hand her father the gift she had brought. She didn't let go of my hand, and I realized that she had been holding it tightly for a while. "Well," her father said, "I was hoping for a son-in-law, but I'm sure I'll like this." At those words, he smiled at his daughter. Opening the bag, he pulled out a baseball, clearly used. His smile widened as the others looked at him in confusion. Leonard said, "Thank you," and then held out the ball. "It's a Mets autographed game ball," he said, and stood up to hug his daughter. I heard him whisper in Sugar's ear, "I'd still prefer a son-in-law." Sugar whispered something back, but I couldn't hear it. Her father chuckled, but when I looked back, her mother was staring at me intently. Just then, Sonia arrived with her husband and 3 children. The little ones rushed into the living room to take their place at the center of everyone's attention. "Oh, it's good you came," Sonia said, giving me a brief hug. After introducing me to her husband Jerry, a tall, thin guy who could have been blown around by a good breeze, Sonia said, "This is Sugar's new love. As you can see, at least she got the gender right this time." Jerry shook my hand and said, "Don't mind Sonia. She just likes to take jabs at her big sister." Soon the conversation in the living room turned to the subject of the children's latest adventures and the gifts they had brought for Grandpa. It was nice to be out of the spotlight, but I could feel Amanda's mother's intense gaze on me. There was the usual food for dinner, but delicious nonetheless. In the conversations around the table, you could feel the joy these people derived from being together. Every now and then, I would be asked some question. If Amanda could answer it, she would answer it for me. For more personal questions, I would answer simply or wave it off. Yeah, my parents are dead. The farm is in Iowa. I have one sister. I deflected all questions about my sister, in part because I didn't know how to answer them. Over coffee and birthday cake, however, the knives came out. Judge Levine was watching, and while the kids were busy eating the gooey cake, she struck. "Tell me, Walter, are you related to Stillman, who is marrying Eloise Schaffer tomorrow?" I paused before answering, but spoke before Amanda, who was sitting across from me, could issue the curt reply I'd anticipated. "Yes and no," I said. "I was supposed to marry Eloise, but it's over. And before you ask, your daughter had nothing to do with the annulment of my marriage." "True," Amanda's mother said, turning to her daughter. "Yes, really, if it concerns you," Amanda said, showing her hostility. "To tell you the truth, I didn't want to bring Walter here, but he was invited, and he was kind enough to come." I could see my mother was about to say something else, but Leonard Moskowitz spoke up and silenced his wife. "Rebecca, be quiet," he said, and before his wife could answer, he added, "Evidently the young man has found out about Mr. Kaufman. I've been watching Walter all evening, and he doesn't strike me as a man who could put up with it." It was as if he had splashed cold water in his wife's face. The judge was suddenly confused. Looking around the table, he realized that Amanda's parents were aware of the situation, but the rest of the diners were not. Amanda stepped in. "I've known Walter for a long time and admired him from afar. When I found him that night, lost and alone, I saw my chance to get to know him better. He was hurt by a truly wicked woman, and yes, Mom, I love him. He is too good a man not to love him." While she was saying this, Amanda walked around the table and hugged me from behind. "Good for my niece," Uncle Morty said, ending the conversation on the subject of Amanda and me. I don't remember much about what happened after that, except that there was an atmosphere of general satisfaction around the table. As we were leaving in a yellow cab, I turned to Amanda. "Are you serious?" I asked. "What?" she replied, trying to evade answering. I couldn't take it anymore and demanded, "When you said you loved me, did you mean it?" The cab became very quiet, and then she slowly raised her head and said, "Yes, I love you. When I first saw you many months ago, I wanted you. But now it's more than just attraction. I love you, Walter Stillman." Next chapter. 30 minutes later, I was arrested. Eloise had apparently sat in our apartment all Friday night, waiting for my return. Where, she thought, could I go? When I did not return the next morning, however, she became desperate. The wedding was scheduled for Monday, and she was suddenly afraid that I might not show up. In a panic, she called the only person she thought had more to lose than she did. Rodrigo Ruiz, aka Rodney Kaufman, immediately began a police search. It took them a day to canvass all the bartenders on Court Street to establish that I had left the Shadow Lady bar in the company of a short brunette. As Amanda and I took a cab 12 blocks to her apartment in Cobble Hill, the police began interviewing all the cabbies operating in the neighborhood that night. It wasn't until late Sunday that they determined that the cab dropped us off at the corner of Clinton and Congress. They quickly determined that the corner apartment in the basement belonged to Amanda Moskowitz, a woman who fit the description of my companion Friday night. The cops found only a dark and empty apartment, but, undaunted, put a couple of patrol cars on standby to await the tenant's return. Upon arrival, Amanda and I found an impatient quartet of officers. They quickly whisked me away, despite Amanda's objections. At midnight, I found myself in a small room that was in dire need of cleaning and a new paint job. I was seated at a table and chained up. No one explained what crime I was accused of. Someone opened the door and Eloise came in. She looked as beautiful as ever. "It's your fault," I demanded. My tone was harsh, and my anger and frustration were obvious. She looked a little taken aback, standing on the other side of the table. There were 2 chairs at her side, but she made no attempt to sit down. "Walter, please try to understand. When you didn't come home, I was worried that something had happened to you. And you had me arrested. For what?" "You are not under arrest, but in protective custody pending a possible psychiatric evaluation," said a tall, very handsome man. He was actually more impressive than he looked in the photos. He entered noiselessly and moved closer to Eloise as he spoke. He was more than 20 years older than me. All his efforts couldn't hide his middle age, and I could tell he was making a great effort to hold back the effects of time. "Rodney Kaufman, I believe." I said it with all the venom I could put into my voice. "Rodrigo Ruiz. But Walt, you may call me Rod, as I hope we become friends." "That's Mr. Stillman to you, and I have no desire for friendship." "That's too bad, as it seems to me you are in a tight spot and could use my friendship." I raised my hands a few inches, causing the chains to tighten on the table. "You can keep me here, but not for long," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "Long enough, I hope, so you can listen to Eloise." She had stood without uttering a word, but now she spoke. "Walter, you are acting wrongly. Rod and I are only friends. Whatever our relationship was, it's over. If you had stayed late on Friday, I would have told you. We have a saying in Iowa. I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night." "I caught you in his hotel room," objected I. "Be that as it may, you two have a wedding date set for today, and it's in everyone's best interest that you honor it." "I'm sorry, but I refuse to marry that whore," I said. Eloise let out a small cry of pain, but Rod only smiled and said, "Language, language, please. Let's keep our composure." "Would you prefer I call her a slut? Because that's what she is, a rich man's whore." I realized I'd hurt Rodney's feelings a little, but he continued to smile. Eloise turned away and cried, "That attitude is going to get you into a lot of trouble. You're being very foolish, young man. Eloise is a fine woman who will make an excellent wife. If you don't marry, there will be a terrible scandal. Reporters are expected at this wedding. It's a social event. Eloise's reputation will be ruined, and so will mine, for the cause will surely be known. People love to gossip, and this will be great gossip. I'm told you have a promising career in a prestigious firm. If you don't marry Miss Schaffer today, your career will evaporate, and I doubt you'll find work elsewhere," he threatened. Now it was my turn to smile. I wouldn't marry that whore for senior partnership, and I certainly wouldn't stay on as a junior associate in the bankruptcy department. "I told you he'd be unreasonable," Eloise intervened, standing with her back to me and definitely crying. Rod only sighed and said, "Okay, Mr. Stillman, how much will it cost me to make Eloise Mrs. Stillman?" "Trust me, you don't have enough money." "It doesn't have to be forever. A year or two and then a discreet divorce." "Won't people ask why?" I challenged him. He didn't flinch, and something told me he had more than one iron in that fire. "The situation at the time of the divorce will be my problem. Name your price for a 2-year marriage." "How pregnant is she?" I asked, finally figuring it out. Eloise turned to me. "She could be yours, you know," she hissed. "Yeah," I said, "but I think I'll wait for the DNA test." Rodney all but said, "How long?" "Not a chance in hell," I almost hissed at him. Further conversation was interrupted by the appearance of a short, fat, balding man who looked to be in his mid-60s. He was followed by 2 uniformed officers. As he entered, he said, "Hello, Rod, Miss Schaffer, and you must be Walter Stillman," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "I'm your attorney, Cy Lebowitz. And this," he said, holding out a paper to Rodney, is a copy of the writ of habeas corpus I just filed in the waiting room. You're up a little late, aren't you, Cy? Said Rod. Well, you know how it is. Business is slow. Miss Schaffer was acting in her fiancé's best interest. You're forcing us to seek a forced arrest, Rodney threatened. I don't see how you can do that, since the court order was issued on behalf of his sister, his only living relative and next of kin. Woke her up, didn't you, Cy? Actually, no. It happens much earlier on the West Coast. Commissioner Rodrigo Ruiz, aka Rodney Kaufman, shrugged. He was beaten. Next chapter. Cy led me out, and Amanda was waiting for me. Her mother, a judge, woke Cy and the judge who signed the order for my release. That was the last time I saw Eloise. The baby never came. I'm not sure of the reason. I know her biological clock was running, and I know she wanted his baby, not mine. However, I'm sure that if the choice was between the scandal her lover suffered or an abortion, she would have chosen the latter. As for his threat to ruin my career, I have no doubt that Commissioner and gubernatorial candidate Rodrigo Ruiz was trying to do his best to ruin me, but circumstances intervened. From September 2nd to September 14th, 2008, I had a honeymoon leave that never materialized. The day I returned to work, September 15th, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, and the financial world was turned upside down. Eric Erickson became the most important partner in the firm, and I became the most important lawyer. It took 6 months of 90-hour weeks for Amanda and me before we could get married. We had to bide our time as she was pregnant, and it was clearly showing. Amanda had not thought to use protection, as she had not slept with a man for some time before that first weekend we spent together. Our oldest was a girl, as were the next 3. 4 was enough, however. Amanda became a judge, following in her mother's footsteps, and I got my own firm. When people ask me what the secret to my successful career and marriage is, I say I owe it all to one day as a judge at the racetrack, one broken heart, and a girl they named Sugar. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.